All right, well, I want to welcome everybody to the Unity Bootcamp here at PixelFest 2018. For those of you who may not know, does everybody know who I am? All right, so I'm Jeremy Alessi. I'm the founder of PixelFest. And PixelFest is about coming in here because you like to play games, but then it is so that you can also learn how to make them. And that's really our mission, is growing artists and programmers through love of games. So we want you to come in, we want you to have fun with games. I'm obviously a person who's very passionate about games, and my passion in games pushed me to want to learn about physics and about art and about programming and computer science and all of these things. And now, I've had a long career of making games in all different fields. So I've made games for Nintendo, I've made mobile games, I've made PC games, I've made games for NATO, I've made augmented reality games, some of the earliest stuff for HoloLens. So I've worked all over the industry, and it's been a very rewarding career. And one of the things that I want to see happen in our area, there is just so that there are more people here to work with, so that we can make even better products out of this region. And to a certain extent, PixelFest was born out of my experience moving from making mobile entertainment games and into entrepreneurship as well. So I see a bridge between game development and between some of the startup companies and things that we see. So when you look at the entrepreneurs that we celebrate, people will go crazy about Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, these types of characters, and they started out making games, which is what's very funny. You look at Steve Jobs, it's like Breakout. I don't know how many people knew that he worked on Breakout, but then you look at Elon Musk wanted to start an arcade in South Africa, where he was from, and the local government said, "Oh, we don't want that riffraff," and they put up a bunch of red tape, so he left. And we and Hampton Road some of my mentors and I have had very extensive conversations about the fact that in Hampton Roads, a lot of talent leaves. So people are raised here, and if they do really well, then oftentimes they leave the area and they'll go to bigger cities where there are other opportunities. And we had one of the first meetings that we had was like a 3.5-hour lunch, and the talk went something like, well, why do we have to leave? Why can't we build the cool stuff here? And I want to give special credit to one of my mentors, Tom Flake, who gave me a story to read called Acres of Diamonds, that was about a fellow who had a farm, and he didn't want to farm. He wanted to find the largest diamond mine in the world. So he sold his farm, traveled the world looking for the biggest diamond mine in the world, and then he died. And they found the biggest diamond mine in the world under his farm. So it's a very interesting story, but it is the ethos is that you should build it here, and you should build what you want to do right under your feet. So and with that, getting into that world, into the startup side of things, I did a startup competition in 2012 called Start Peninsula, and won at that event, and it was great. I got $10,000 for winning the startup competition, and I created a software that's now known as StreamSDK on the Unity asset store, so you can actually check that out. A team on Microsoft bought a copy of the software last week, so I was super happy about that. Something I've been working on for a long time, but as I got into the startup world, though, I realized that I ran into two types of people. I ran into really hardcore engineers who did not know how to explain what they were working on, and then I ran into people who had great ideas and no technical execution, like they would not be able to build anything at all. And as a game developer, you have both of these skill sets. You have to know complex, C# code, back-end code, database code, all these things that make a game tick. But when you hand it to somebody, they have to be able to get it in 3 seconds, right? And they don't care how complex your code is; they just want to play the game and have fun. And so there's in my opinion, as I was talking to people, I thought, well, I feel like I kind of have this thing because I made games, and I started my career just as an indie game developer. But from wearing all these hats, I was able to sort of combine things together and make them easy to understand, and also handle the complexity on the back end. So when we look at our area, especially if we look at it from the standpoint of wanting to elevate the commercial success of the region, especially in today's world where a lot of the commercial success is dependent on software and how good your software is, then what we want to do is have people who are more technically capable who can execute this stuff. And so as I was hanging out a lot of these, it was different incubators and accelerators, different startup competitions around the area, and every time I was at a startup competition, there would be somebody who'd be like, oh gosh, if only I had a programmer, or I need technical assistance. And I was usually in there pitching my own idea and being my own technical assistance. So if you look at Y Combinator, I think is the most preeminent sort of startup program in the world, and one of the things that they try to look for are technical founders. So it's, you understand the intent of the idea that you're working on, and not only that, you can execute at least the beginning of that. You can prove that intent yourself. And so that is part of the reason and part of the inspiration for what we've done at PixelFest, even though I think that it's, you know, it's sort of veiled by the element of gaming, but really when you look underneath, when you peer under the veil of gaming, what you're actually looking at is some very technical stuff. So without further ado though, I'm going to get into the Unity Bootcamp. Unity is a tool that I've been using for, I don't know, it's probably getting close to 15 years now. It's like 13 years, something like that. The folks that started this company were three guys in a basement at one point. Now this is a $2.5 billion company. And I think their software is now responsible for, if not the majority of games in the game industry, probably a plurality of games that are developed in the industry. And I use this software to make almost everything. You can make an app with it, you can make a game with it. And I use this professionally, and then when I go and I teach, so when we do boot camps for PixelFest, we also do a computer science program at Norfolk Collegiate School, and we will show people, and teenagers, kids, how to use this software. And there's no, it's not like if you're using a piece of software that's abstracted, there's no abstraction right between this and professional, what you're going to develop professionally. So whatever you learn with this, you could take this and scale it all the way up and make Pokemon Go is made with Unity, for example. So just to give you an idea. So the first thing that we're going to do is boot up Unity. So if you, obviously you've got your laptop, and anybody else that has brought their laptop with them, you can boot Unity up, and otherwise folks can just follow along and see what it's all about. And when you boot it up, we want to create a new project. And I'm actually going to make a slight riff. Did anybody watch the bootcamp video, the bootcamp preview that I posted? I don't know if anybody caught that. You caught that. All right. So I am going to make a slight change to that project. So normally I call a project a character because it's all about creating a character. But I'm going to prepare us to make something that has a little bit more scale than that. So I'm just going to call it, game, right, for right now. So project name game, and I'm going to save it right to my desktop just to make things easy on myself. Folder, game. So I made a game folder on my desktop, and I hit select folder, and my project's called game. I'm going to make it a two-dimensional project and create a project. And can everyone hear me just without the mic? Okay. And if you watched the preview, did you actually build the project, or did you just kind of watch it? And I'm going to go to the boot camp. Okay. So this boot camp too is something that, just the flow of this is something we've worked on for a while. Not, I don't want to say purposely, just organically over the years, because we want to have an easy way to explain what Unity is and show you all the moving parts and try to make it comprehensible, and also help you to learn about how computers actually work, how time on a computer works, things like that. So we'll get into many of those details. Full disclosure, this is not my normal machine, which is a little bit quicker, but we had some display issues, and so I'm going to be working off of this box. And hopefully we won't have too many hang-ups like this loading screen.
Have you noticed with 2018 that seems like it does load slower?
Right now, I'm noticing it very much so. Come on, 2018, let's go.
Yeah.
Woo, come on, I'm used to this. I'm not used to this. It usually boots up very quickly, so.
I have a relatively fast box too, and I realized 2017 and 2018 is slower.
So, and I've been using Unity for so long that every time they took a step, I was like, these freaking people. No, because when they went from Unitron, which was their original like code editor, to MonoDevelop, I got angry. And then when they moved from MonoDevelop to Visual Studio, I got angry. I was like, this is slower, and and then I get used to it, and that's okay. So we all like what we have by default. Speaking of default, the first thing I'm going to do is just go to the default layout, which is, we did that in the bootcamp video. So if you've just booted up Unity, and also you probably don't have a pro version, so I'm going to switch that as well, so that it looks like what you will see. So there you go. So this is the personal skin. So if you just downloaded Unity for the first time, you should see something like this. And what I want to do is just explain the windows that you see, because if you boot this up for the first time, it probably looks pretty complicated, and you're like, what the heck is this stuff? So I'm going to point you to the lower left corner, which is the project view first. This is where you store all of your raw assets. So if you're making sprites, you're going to have PNG files with alpha channels, and those are going to be your characters or your tiles for your two-dimensional game that you're working on. And any raw asset like that, images, 3D models, scripts, shaders, all that type of stuff is going to be in the assets folder here in the project view. Now Unity, by default in 2018, gives you a scene, and I really don't want their scene, so I'm just going to delete that. I don't know why they do that. They're imposing upon me, I feel too much there. But maybe for a new user, that's something nice. So I don't want to save their scene. Now I've got just a plain scene. So what I did was I deleted that scene, and then I just said File, New, and I made a new scene right there. And so this is a totally empty scene. So whenever you make a new scene in Unity, what you'll see is just a main camera up in the upper left-hand corner in what's called the hierarchy. So we move from our project view, which is where raw assets will go, up to the hierarchy, and this is where you'll see a text representation of what your game is currently comprised of. So currently, we only have a camera in our scene, and that's it. And so we see the main camera here in the hierarchy. And if you come over to the right, you have something called the scene view. So this is a visual representation of what's in your game. So I can see there a little camera icon, and I get a sense of what the window will look like by that white square. Next to the scene view, just to the right of it, if you click on the tab, there's the game view. So this is what you would see if you were actually running the game. So if I hit the play button, nothing's going to happen because I haven't scripted anything and there's no graphics in it or anything like that. But basically, if I could actually export this and have an executable and run it, and my game would just be a blue screen of death. So, and look at that, they put the asset store up by default. The asset store, which they put apparently in the default view, I don't really want that. But that is where you can go and actually get pre-made assets that other people have pulled things together in Unity and sort of compiled them for you so that you can get a leg up. So you can get a character that's already animated so that you don't have to animate that character from scratch. You can also get code libraries, particle systems, sort of all the bits and pieces that go into making a game. If we move over to the right further, to the far right, you'll see a tab called Inspector. And what this is a list of components that comprise the main camera. So the first component is called a transform, and a transform is a position, rotation, and scale in three-dimensional space. Each of these fields of the transform are what would be considered vector 3s, which is a type. So who knows what a vector is? All right, so a vector is a direction coupled with a magnitude, right? And so, I'm going 85 miles an hour that way, and we can obviously, with a vector 3, it's a three-dimensional vector, that's all. We've got a camera component, we have a flare layer, and an audio listener. So our main camera is comprised of 4 components. And one thing I like to talk about with components to help you understand where this idea came from, who knows what object-oriented programming is? All right. So in the past, with object-oriented programming, and the idea of object-oriented programming was so that you could reuse stuff, so that you don't write everything procedurally from scratch, so that I could come up with a class called lifeform, and then I might have a class that extends lifeform that's called human. And so human would have some components of lifeform, but then there would be some aspects of the human class that make it individually human. And then this is a way that I could build up. So I could build up, from Quark or whatever, all the way up to whatever the most complex object that you want to make is. Now in the past, there was this chain of inheritance, and that's just how you did object-oriented programming. But I would say, again, around 13, 14 years ago, and maybe it was further, but this is when it sort of first came into my purview, was the idea of composition-based object orientation. And I have a great example. So I was at Indie Games Conference in Oregon, like in 2007, I think, actually. And they were talking about taking the Torque engine, which was originally the Tribes game engine, and Garage Games had sort of splintered off from Dynamics, and they bought some of their own IP back. So they had this game engine. It was primarily a first-person shooter game engine, but they wanted to generalize it and make it available for everybody. And they had very similar things to Unity. So when you look at Torque, a lot of the things that we see in Unity today, Torque had those features. They had like an asset store that you could go and get pre-made assets, and all those ideas were sort of pioneered by this team. Actually, this company is the company that pioneered the term indie game. I think at some point, I was told by one of their guys that they could have trademarked this term because it just didn't exist anywhere else yet. But the rest of the company said, no, that would be evil, we're not going to do it. And then Unity came along and ate their lunch at some point. But the idea is that instead of this chain of inheritance, and the example is they made this great butterfly for their asset store. Somebody was 3D modeled it, gave it great textures, scripted it so this butterfly would fly all around the scene and everything like that. And as the butterfly is flying around the scene, all of a sudden it picks up a crossbow. And so obviously it's completely illogical. A butterfly should not be able to pick up a crossbow. But what had happened was they're what's called base class. So in the example of where we have a human and then we have life form would be the base class of human. When their most base class that you could use as a player character in the Torque engine, they had the ability to pick up a crossbow. So it wasn't really base enough, you might say, right? And instead of sort of going back and rewriting all their class systems, they said, oh, this is a problem, and this is the problem that composition-based object orientation fixes, because now what I could do is I could write a component that's like pick up crossbow and just drag it onto my character, and I don't have to drag that onto every character. So in essence, what I'm doing with composition-based object orientation is building a new custom class that's like specific for that game object. Now, what I can do in Unity is once I build one up, I can actually create a prefab of that. So even my main camera here, if I wanted to, I could drag the main camera down, and all of a sudden my main camera turns blue up there, and I have this object down in my project view that is a prefab of that main camera, which I could then take and put in any other game or any other scene in this particular project that I want. I could also export it and then put it into another game. And so that sort of gives us the intent of object orientation was so that we wouldn't rewrite everything over and over and over again, and we could create these code libraries that we could use forever when it did that. But composition-based object orientation avoids some of these other pitfalls where you have dangling capabilities or traits that you don't want anymore. So I can build the game object exactly how I want it, and then I can prefab it out, I can edit the prefab, I can make new components, edit components, etc. So that's object orientation. Now, are there any questions so far with the layout of the editor? Everybody comfortable with the project view, the hierarchy, the scene view, and the game view? Yeah?
So wait, how do you import assets, or are we getting to assets?
I'm going to get to importing assets in just a second, yeah.
Just a question on a buggy thing with Unity. When you get your fonts messed up at times, is there a quick fix for that?
So are you saying where it goes corrupted, where the fonts go
Well, like
corrupted?
for example, at the top here we have scene in games. Sometimes I get things where it's kind of thick and hard to read.
Right. Yeah, it comes back though once it compiles, right?
I don't think so.
Oh, interesting. That one you might have to look up. So sometimes I see behavior like that when in the lower right-hand corner there'll be like a spinning wheel, and so when something is loading or there's a change, sometimes I get an effect like that. But usually, if that's working properly, then I won't get that. The one other window that normally comes by default is the console. We'll get to that in a second, just because that's going to be where errors pop up when you're writing code and you made a mistake. So I'm going to pop open GIMP, and hopefully it'll open relatively quickly. We'll see. And normally I work with Photoshop, but for these boot camps, we like to recommend GIMP just because it's free. So if you're dipping your toe in the water and you don't want to spend an arm and a leg on Photoshop, you can get GIMP for free online. You can also use a tool called Piskel that it's a web browser-based sprite editor, and you can do animation and all sorts of cool stuff and it just runs right in your browser. So that's one I've been excited about lately. I'm actually showing my daughter. She's been plotting pixels with Piscal, and also our team of high school students that we had as interns this summer used it to great effect for a role-playing game that we're putting together. Okay, so GIMP's up, and I'm going to just create the simplest character that I can. So I'm going to go File, New. I want a 64 pixel by 64 pixel sprite. So it's pretty small, but I'm going for like a Super Nintendo-esque aesthetic right now. I'm going to change the fill width transparency, so I want this to, hopefully it'll have a checkered background. Great. So I went to advanced options in GIMP, and if you're in Photoshop, you can also choose transparency. The only thing I want to do is, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. That'll work. I don't use GIMP that often, but it's it's passable. It does its job. So I set the scale down. The scale was at 1, and I really don't want the lines to be that thick. So I'm going to just draw a head and like some eyes and a smile. This guy's happy because he's at PixelFest. Body, arms, legs, great. This is probably one of the worst characters I've made in this boot camp, but it's terrible. So save as, and I am going to save this guy as a PNG. That's what I'm going to want. Desktop, I have my project called Game, and I'm going to put it in the Assets folder and save it as Character. Ugly character. Whew. So now I'm going to quit GIMP. I don't need that anymore. And when I come into Unity, hopefully, there should be a character waiting for me. Come on back. There it is. That did not come. That is not the right file format. That's not what I was looking for. So we're going to go back to GIMP. Chose PNG, did I not? Ah, you know what? The extension up top didn't change. Oh, there's a little. What's going on now? There we go. So, in case you didn't catch that, there's a little plus box down there where you can choose file type by extension. And I probably just needed to change the extension up top like I did. Ah, there we go. Save background color. First I'm going to uncheck that and see what I get. And then if I don't like the results of that, oh, that looks good. So I unchecked the save background color, and I'm going to delete this. I don't need that. So Unity has already brought this in as a sprite. If for some reason you don't see the little arrow to the right there, then what you're going to want to do is come over to the inspector once you've highlighted the asset and just change the texture type. So there are several different types that you can choose from, and you want a sprite. And this is what's going to sort of automatically give you the transparent background by default. So it's called an alpha channel. So when you have any character on screen, you only see the body of the character, but truthfully that character is always a box. And then what happens is you just don't draw certain pixels. And so those pixels are what's called the alpha channel. So now that I've got a character, I'm going to drag that character up into my scene view. I choose scene view first. I put the character in. Man, the character is itty bitty, isn't he? So, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my main camera, and I'm going to go to the inspector, and I'm just going to set the orthographic size to 1. And then I'm also going to take a look at my game view here. I've got a free aspect ratio. I'm going to add a new resolution. So I went to where it says free aspect. There's a little plus sign at the bottom. And I'm going to just label it 320 by 240. Yeah. So this is sort of like a 16-bit type resolution. So I'm going to take the character and set the position to 0, 0, 0. So now the character is right in the middle of the screen there. All right, we've got a character ready to play the game, right? Go! Jump, jump, jump! Come on. Okay. All right. Well, that's going nowhere fast because we have to actually write some code to control the character. Any questions at this point? No? Good. Great. Awesome. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click next to my character and say create C# script. So we're going to write some C# code. And I'm going to call that character also. And I'll double click on it, and I will need to find other options to open this thing up. Please don't make me use Notepad to write my code. All right, so let's see where I can browse. So Unity should have opened MonoDevelop, and we'll see where that goes. Unity. We'll go back to Unity 5, MonoDevelop. So Unity 2018 should have had Visual Studio on it. Let's see what happens when we do this. And worst case scenario, you can always write your code with Notepad. There's no shame in it. It's, you know,
Notepad plus plus.
yeah. Appears to be, so what I did, because I've got 2018 installed here, and I don't know why Visual Studio just didn't pop up, but I just pointed back to MonoDevelop that was installed with Unity 5 and went ahead and used that. So that works for me. And since we don't have that many people following along, I don't think we'll be losing anybody. All right, so this is what you get when you create a script in Unity. Can everybody see the screen well?
Yeah.
All right. So at the top of the script, we see these 3 using statements, and Unity is built on .NET, and .NET with C# we have what's called the garbage collector. So in the past, if you were writing, say, C or C++ code, you would have had to manage all your own memory. So if you wanted to use an integer, you probably would have had to allocate the memory for that, and you would have had to know how much memory goes into that, and then you would have had to deallocate the memory. And an invention came along called the garbage collector. And so basically, at this point, when you define a variable, it will come into scope, and .NET will figure out when it goes out of scope, and then it will clean up that memory for you. So you don't have to really worry so much about allocating and deallocating all your memory. So those are the first 2 lines there. And then when you see using Unity engine, what I like to say is that Unity is .NET plus a game engine built on top of it. So it really gives you a lot of power because you have basically the full power of .NET behind you. And the Unity engine, though, is also gives you a tremendous amount of capability. So if you go to the Unity manual, which is help back at Unity, help Unity manual, and hopefully it actually comes up. You can go to scripting API. And we wanted to look up the Unity engine. Actually, if you just look at the scripting API, you can expand the Unity engine tab. And these are all the namespaces here, but you can come down to classes, and these are all the classes that Unity gives you. So it gives you a tremendous amount of capability. Does anybody know the tunnel traffic app? Has anybody seen that? Nobody here? We haven't been focused on that lately, but it's a traffic monitoring and reporting system for the tunnels here, but also written in Unity. So.
Wasn't that ODU or something?
Was that tunnel traffic?
Yeah.
I know, I wrote tunnel traffic. Yeah. But just an example of using this game development tool and cool sort of game dev visualization, and then pulling data like real-time data from mobile devices, all using this tool to create a real-time monitoring and reporting system for traffic. So that's the power that the Unity engine gives you. And you know, obviously, if you get into this and you download this, go check out the classes and just see all the capability it gives you to get ideas for what you're going to make.
The classes are really good.
Yeah. Now, when you come down to the next line, you see public, class, character, and there's a colon, and then there is mono behavior. So mono behavior is actually one of the classes, and we can check that out and see what it gives us. So I just typed mono behavior into the search into the Unity manual, and the Wi-Fi here is a little slow, so this is actually linking directly to Unity's website.
Oh, and I'm killing the Wi-Fi.
Just stop now. I can't believe you didn't have it already. You had it from like 2 years ago.
It's on my other computer.
Ah, okay.
It's on my dad's laptop.
So when I click on mono behavior, we can see, and this is kind of nice. They give you right up top here some of the what are called callbacks, and these are some of the callbacks that you'll probably use quite often while you're writing a game. The first two are start and update. I think those are probably considered the most important because the next lines that you'll see are the start and update callbacks. So start is when you want something to happen one time at the beginning of your program. It's just for initialization, and you can see they've got a little comment here to guide you. Use this for initialization. So you know, I've got I'm trying to think. I want to name my character, or you know, I want my character to do something just one time at the beginning of the program. I would put it there, and I actually I'm trying to think. We have an example of this. Say I wanted my character just to like scale in and out. I could have a routine that I call just one time there. I don't want it to scale in and out every single frame. I just wanted to do something like that once, and so I could call a routine from start that would happen just at the beginning of the program. And the next callback is the update callback, and you'll notice that it says update is called once per frame. So update will be called as fast as your computer will call it. Like whatever your CPU will do, the update will use it all, right? And in the update callback now, because we have a character, and we really, I think, want to move this character around on screen. So I'm going to type transform dot position new vector 3 dot x plus input dot get axis. And I'll have to break this down in a second, but scroll over here. Alright, so we're going to unbox that, and that's working better, so it's not actually putting it on the screen. So what we want to be able to do is use the arrow keys, and in this case it'll also work with WAS and D, to move our character around the screen. So from before, when I explained what a transform was, does everybody remember a transform was a component that represented a position, a rotation, and a scale in 3D space? And so the position, obviously, is where it's positioned in 3D space. And I said that's a vector 3. It's of type vector 3. So in our C# code here, we're going to set it to a new vector 3. So when you have something like character, you have the class character itself, and then you can have what are called instances of classes. With character being an extension of mono behavior, there are instances. But if I was writing just a standalone class and I didn't extend mono behavior, I would have the class character, and then I could say new character, just like we see new vector 3 here, and that would create an instance. So that's the difference between saying, well, I have humanity, which is the class for all humans, and then here I have this instance of human called Jeremy that has certain properties and such. So this is the idea. We've got transform.position, which is a unique vector 3, and we want that to be represented as an instance of vector 3. So new vector 3 creates an instance, and then what we do is we're going to just set it to be whatever the current position is, and in this case we broke it all the way down to the x, y, and z components. And then we're going to add whatever we're getting from the keyboard to it, right? So input means we're going to be getting input from some device. In this case, input.getAxis, horizontal and vertical, will represent the keyboard. And I'll show you where to look that up. If you come back to Unity and go in, edit, project settings, input, and extend this where it says axes, this is the input manager. And the first two tabs that we have are horizontal and vertical. And we can see that horizontal, which is literally a string. So in computer science, if you have letters, that would be considered a string variable. So we've got horizontal, and it is set to the left and right keys, or the A and D keys here. And then vertical is set to the up and down, or S and W keys. So that's where that notation comes from. And basically, if I hold left or right, I'll either get a -1 or a +1. And if I hold up or down, I'll also get a plus or -1. And so what will end up happening is we'll say, well, transform.position.x plus 1. And so my character will move either right or left. And I'm going to Control S this, save it, and come on back. Come on back. Let's see. Oh, do I have an error? That's a first. Spelled position wrong. Look at that. Oh my goodness. Go away. Position. Got another error. Oh, I gotta stop doing that. So normally when you double click on your errors, Unity will take you right over to it. Position. I think we look all good there. Oh, no, I didn't. All right. So we'll see the little spinning wheel down here, and now all the errors are gone. And the next thing I need to do though, before I actually get interactivity from my character, is to drag this script onto the character. So I can drag it, and Unity has about 1 million ways to add a component like that. I can drag and drop the script. I can highlight this and like right click and add it. I can go up here to component and under scripts and add it. I can go over here and hit add component and just type character, and it'll find my character script for me and add it. So there are a lot of ways to add it, and over the years, Unity's gotten very good at sort of addressing different types of thinkers. You know, some people like to drag and drop, some people like to select, whatever. There's probably a way that it will work for you. So now when I hit the play button, hopefully I can move. All right, so wow, I can move, but really fast. Guys, moving. That's great. So the issue is that this CPU, as terrible as it is incredibly fast, right? It's probably performing billions of operations per second, and even though like an addition is probably like 4 actual CPU operations or something, this is too fast. My CPU is too fast to actually reliably control this. So the next thing I'm going to do is make my computer respect time. So I'm going to multiply this by time.delta time, and I'm going to do the same thing on the y-axis. Did I spell it wrong? I did. Delta time. Don't you like delta time? Delta time? Alright. I don't want you there. Come on over here. Was that Jackson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I knew it. I think Jackson's one of the only people in my boot camp who was like, now what you're going to do is this, telling me what I'm going to do next.
and I was wrong, man.
No, I don't think you were wrong that often, man. Honestly, I think you got some capability. All right. So what time.delta time does is it gives us the delta between the last frame. And so on a very fast computer, the time is going to be very small. So when we do that multiplication, it's going to be just a little bit, right? I'm just going to multiply that 1. I'm going to take that 1 and actually decrease it, right? So normally I'm moving like this much per frame. I'm going to take it back to here, so I'm just moving this much per frame. Now, on a slower machine, of course, the delta is going to be bigger, so that means I'm going to move my character more per frame. And what this does is it makes it respect real time, so that the character will actually move at the same speed. I was going to sneeze there. It'll move at the same speed no matter which hardware it's running on, as long as the hardware is, well, able to keep up with that. You obviously could have something that's just way too slow, but this is the point of this is to make a fast machine sort of stay in line with something that might be slower. Now, if you have something that's too slow, if I'm going back and run this on like a 1 megahertz machine or something, like, yeah, I'm not going to move at all, but that's to be seen. So now, when I play, it took a second to compile there. Hopefully, I'll have, oh, I've got like a nice grandma character there, nice and slow. All right, but it's controllable. So now I have a character that's actually controllable. Of course, the next step is that when I have different types of characters, they have different speeds. And I want to be able to make my characters, editable. If I have Sonic the Hedgehog, for example, and I have Mario, Sonic should be faster than Mario, and I should be able to use the same character base class to create both of those characters, right? I shouldn't have to, write up a whole new class. So what we're going to do is make a variable called speed, public float speed, and a float is a number with a decimal in it, right? So if I have an int, if I say public int speed, then an integer is going to be a whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I have a float, I'll be able to say 1.1 or 0.075, something to that effect. And it gives me more it gives me more flexibility. Technically, it's less precise. So floating point math on a processor doesn't always come out the same, right? You can actually get errors in your floating point mathematics. Kind of a funny thing. Does anybody follow Bitcoin or cryptocurrency at all? Yeah, so like a lot of times we'll see cryptocurrency represented as a decimal, but the truth is that it's just, you have to use whatever the smallest denomination is, and that there are no decimals there, because otherwise we'd introduce floating point errors to that protocol, which we don't want. All right. So now what we see in the inspector is a speed field, and it says 0. So, I was able to move my character a second ago, but now I can't move my character at all, right? Oh. I got ahead of myself there. We made the variable, which is great. We actually have to implement it. So I'm going to now multiply, I like to do my delta time afterwards. So I'm going to insert a multiplication by speed here. Speed. And we don't want to stop that. So let Unity compile, and then we'll actually get to the point that I was trying to make. Now, I was able to move my character a second ago, and I can't move my character because now I'm multiplying by 0, so can't go anywhere. So I'm going to change that. Obviously before we had basically a multiplication of 1, and our character seemed a little slow, so we can try it 2, which, that feels reasonable. And I could sort of prototype it, be like, well, let's try 4. Let's double it again and see how fast the character is, Whoa. All right, character's getting a little, I could lose control of my character at this point. Maybe I want a 3. See what that feels like. One thing to keep in mind is as you're working with Unity, I've hit the play button and I'm editing this component in real time. When I hit the play button again, it's going to reset all those changes. So if you have found the perfect combination on your components where you're sort of rough prototyping, make sure you remember the number or write it down somewhere. Especially you can get to the point where you're doing quite a bit of editing on those components, and if you hit the play button and lose it, you might be upset. You could also copy the values here. So you could right click on here and say copy component, and then you can paste those values. So maybe I'm playing the game and I've edited 3 and I want to move my character on. I found that's a good speed. I don't know. Maybe I could just copy this component, stop it. Oh, it's gone. And paste component values. Boom. So that's another way to do it. I don't know if I often do it that way or if I just remember what I was doing. Are there any questions so far? I think we're probably we're in the last few minutes here. We've got about 6 minutes to go. So if there are no questions, I might just keep messing around.
Well, you just asked one on game development with Unity.
Yeah.
How do you know if it's going to work for mobile?
I have a very good point that I have to make also in addition to that. So if you're working on your desktop and you want to develop for mobile, there are a lot of articles out there that will talk about the number of draw calls that you want to see, the number of polygons, etc. If you're just talking, are you talking raw performance?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see, because a lot of times, I mean, I've collected a good bit of assets in Unity, and I've got some game designs I'm starting to roll out on, but I'm not always sure that it's gonna work for mobile. But then again, you see a lot of stuff on mobile these days that's high-end, it just takes a longer download.
My iPhone 7 is now faster than, like, I had a 2012 top-of-the-line MacBook Pro, and this iPhone 7, which is a 2016 device, will render graphics faster than my Mac Pro will. And like my Mac Pro could max out Crisis or whatever. So what was that?
Yours will run the rest of this one.
Yeah, it's like, so one point that I have that I did not make before, talking about object orientation. One of the things that you will see in a lot of Unity tutorials is you'll see folders when you come into a project that'll say scripts, textures, materials, and that is really useful if you've just come into Unity and you don't know what the asset types are. But when you want to scale a project up and you've got a project that's going to become quite large, you actually want to apply that object-oriented mentality to your project. So to do that now, I'm actually going to create a folder called character. Because see, here I have a sprite called character and a script called character. That is all for my object character. And now what I want to do is have a folder called character, and I'm just going to drag these assets now into that folder. And I'm also going to save the scene as character. And this works in Unity because you have these really defined types. So when I come in and I look at that, I see 3 files all named character, but clearly one is a sprite, one is a C# script, and one is a Unity scene. And so it's very apparent what that is. The last thing you want to do is go into a project and see like a scripts folder, and you're like, all right, and you go into the scripts folder, there's 1,000 scripts, and you don't know which script goes with which object. I've had that experience too often, and as I've built projects, like I said, that have become quite large, and I'm dealing with multi-gigabyte projects, you need a way to keep that all straight. And so just using that object-oriented mentality as you're developing your folder structure that's where you want to be. And that will allow you to, as far as I can tell, this seems to scale infinitely. Yep.
What do you do if you have like a script that works with 2 things?
So what I do is I will create a utilities folder. So when I have some like general purpose script, I'll throw that in utilities. So I'd be like, basically anything that's going to move just a transform or some sort of root object, folder utilities, and in utilities, good question though. Then I would come in here and I would actually literally make a folder called transform. And then anything where I want to just manipulate, like only manipulate a transform, right? I want rotation, I want an object that looks at other objects, things like that. I would go in there and I've got a whole library of just stuff that just operates on raw Unity components. And these are things that can be shared between multiple projects, and the only thing that they truly have in common is Unity itself. And nothing project specific should make its way into that utilities folder. So, all right, we have about 2 minutes. So, yeah, go.
So you wrote a script to drive into your character, how do you see what script you want to
You
So-
click on the character you see on the right. So you
Yep.
see on the right where it says character, parentheses script.
Okay.
That's right. And as I said, also there's multiple ways to do that. So if I wanted to highlight my character, come over to the inspector where I can actually view the components that are on it, and then I could hit add component, and this makes it a little bit more direct. So I could type character here, enter. Now I've got 2 character components on there. I don't know what's going to happen. I guess he's going to move at a speed of 1.5. I don't know. What do you think? No, he's going to move at a speed of 3, right? He's still going to move at the same speed. All right. Really mess it up. I put a -3 in there. So I want
Wait,
to.
what would happen if you set one to negative?
Yeah, so they just fight each other, right? Yeah. All right. Well, that's if there are no more questions, and obviously feel free to come up to me and just ask any questions you might have, just on the side too. But yeah.
Just a note might be helpful for him about about the question marks with the book.
So go ahead, expand on that.
Okay, like for example, you see where it has
Oh, yeah.
screen render? If you click on that little thing that has the question mark, this is
Boom.
pretty cool. It opens it up inside of Unity's website.
Takes you right to the docs.
And it shows you the exact stuff that pertains to that. So you have contextual information based on what you're working on with those little icons all throughout.
That's fantastic advice. Absolutely. Anybody else? All right. Well, thanks for attending the boot camp. Like I said, I want everybody to come in because they like games and like to play games and obviously play the games that are out there. But I think, like diving down into the technology and learning about this stuff and collaborating with other people that you meet here to make projects of your own, whether it be a game, an app, some sort of, just visual experience. That's, I think, at the core of what we're trying to do, growing artists and programmers. That's it. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.